Okay, so today we'll start off with some basic accounting things. Okay. Now these basic accounting में हम आज चीजें देखेंगे कोई 4 से 5 चीजें देखेंगे. सबसे पहले हमें इसमें देखना है कि जी we need to see regarding journal entries. Journal entries में I will be making a sales cycle, purchase cycle, and miscellaneous entries. ठीक है. So बेसिक अकाउंटिंग के साथ साथ इसमें सेल साइकिल परचेज साइकिल के अंदर बहुत सारी एंट्रीज ऑलरेडी कवर हो जाती हैं, बट हम उसके साथ साथ देखेंगे बेसिक मिसलेनियस एंट्रीज, because generally what people generally suffers with is the basic accounting की journal entries. Okay, साथ साथ इन्हीं में some ledger accounts, how to make ledger accounts, how to post ledger accounts. So this thing is gonna end pretty soon. इसके बाद we look at day books, also known as books of prime entries. Books on prime entries may we look at the functions of each book. उसके बाद we look at ledgers and basically functions of each ledger. ठीक है जी. और finally हम इसके बाद कुछ basic हमने business documents तो देख लेते हैं, लेकिन साथ साथ डे बुक्स के बाद लेजर्स के बाद we look at how to like make these ledgers and the usefulness of everything. Okay, all right, coming on to this ठीक है जी, view is like 80% so that I can get more space to write. All right, तो यहाँ से हम इसको start करते हैं. Now before we start up with the basic journal entries, हमें basically आपका accounting rule देखना पड़ेगा. So what is your accounting rule? Accounting rule is basically कि you have particular heads of accounts. आपके पास कुछ heads of accounts होते हैं. उन heads of accounts की basis के ऊपर आप journal entries करते हैं. तो accounting के heads कौन कौन से होते हैं? Accounting के heads होते हैं आपके पास you have assets, you have liabilities and capital. इन्हीं accounting heads में से एक accounting equation बनती है which is assets is equal to liabilities plus capital. This is known as your accounting equation. ठीक है जी. Okay. Apart from this, you have two more accounting heads, which is income and expenses. Income minus expenses is either your profit or loss. So income minus expense is either your profit or it could be your loss. ठीक है जी. अब यहाँ जो बेसिक चीज है वो देखने की कि ये चीजें आपकी आती हैं स्टेटमेंट ऑफ फाइनेंशियल पोजीशन में, और ये दोनों अकाउंटिंग हेड्स आते हैं आपकी इनकम स्टेटमेंट में. ठीक है जी. स्टेटमेंट ऑफ फाइनेंशियल पोजीशन एंड इनकम स्टेटमेंट. ठीक है. ओके, नाउ मूविंग ऑन. अब आपके पास अकाउंटिंग के अंदर डेबिट एंड क्रेडिट होता है. Debit and credit are basically two sides of a ledger account. ठीक है जी. It's a T account, ledger account. The left side is known as the debit side. The right side is known as the credit side. So now, किन conditions में debit होगा? So debit की conditions are as follows. When assets and expenses in a particular transaction will increase, they will be posted on the debit side. And when assets and expenses in a particular transaction would decrease, they will be posted on the credit side. ठीक है जी. This is the first thing. उसके बाद liabilities, income, and capital. They share the same rule, which is when they will increase, they will be posted on the credit side, and when they'll decrease, they'll be posted on the debit side. So for liability, income, and capital, they have a same rule. Assets and expenses have a same rule. In order to understand it easily, आप इसको AE American Eagle और EA Sports करके समझ सकते हैं. So AE और American Eagle, they share the same rule, or LIC or CLI, they share the same rule. ठीक है जी. Now, having said that, यहाँ पे एक चीज बहुत important है. वो important ये है कि जी every monetary transaction has a debit and credit posting. Every monetary transaction have a debit posting and a credit posting of equal amount, which means amount of debit will always be equal to amount of credit. ये हो सकता है कि डेबिट एक चीज हो रही हो, क्रेडिट तीन चीजें हो रही हो, या क्रेडिट एक चीज हो रही हो, डेबिट चार चीजें हो रही हो. But the overall amount of debit and credit in a given transaction will be equal. ठीक है जी. That's the rule. It's just like a पुराने जमाने का weighing scale, old style weighing scale, which has two sides. So in order to like keep both the balances equal, you need to put in the equal weights on both the sides. ठीक है जी. अब आप यहाँ पर इस डेबिट और क्रेडिट में आप देखते हैं कि जी where do you find assets? Assets, you find them in SOFP. SOFP में assets में you have two broad categories, non-current assets and current assets. Expenses, you find them in income statement. Expenses के अंदर you have capital expenditure and revenue expenditure. ठीक है जी. Revenue expenditure is an income statement. Capital expenditure comes in the statement of financial position. Liabilities भी दो तरह की होती हैं, long term liability and current liability. Income, revenue receipts and capital receipts, हमने कल एक question किया था इसके ऊपर. And finally capital. Okay. Now, अब मैं basically I have made this thing. This is something known as sales cycle. Sales cycle means selling of inventory or stock or goods. ठीक है जी. So sales is an income. Income जब increase होगी तो credit, decrease होगी तो debit. ठीक है जी. जब भी आप किसी को गुड सेल करेंगे तो that's an income, increase in income. If those goods are returned back to you, that is sales return, तो income will decrease. ठीक है. Okay. तो sales cycle में I can take like goods sold for cash and goods sold on credit. Goods sold for cash and goods sold on credit. So what is the journal entry that you're going to make for goods sold for cash? इसकी journal entry होगी आपकी. क्या journal entry होगी? कोई बता सकता है? It is cash debit and sales credit. Asset increase debit, income increase credit. But if you're selling goods on credit, that means you're selling your goods to some individual, some person. That person is your customer. That customer is also known as trade receivable. So entry is going to be trade receivable debit and sales credit. Asset increase, income increase. ठीक है जी. So trade receivable is your customer is an asset increases on the debit side. Now, इसके बाद next entry would be sales returned by customer. That means your customer is returning goods back to you. ठीक है जी. So इसकी entry होगी आपकी sales return debit and account receivable or trade receivable credit. Now, this will be like income decrease and asset decrease. ठीक है जी, because this is exactly the opposite of sales. Whatever you are doing is the opposite of sales now, so that's how it's going to happen. Next is discount allowed to customer. When you allow discount to your customers, तो इसकी क्या entry होगी? The entry for this will be discount allowed debit and account receivable credit. Your expense is increasing, your asset is decreasing. देखिए यहाँ पे एक चीज important है. When you are selling goods to your customer, the customer's balance in your books is increasing. अब जब वो return कर रहा है, when goods are returned back to you, the customer's balance is decreasing. When you are giving him a discount, so the customer balance is again decreasing. ठीक है जी. So with sales, customer balance increases in your books. With sales return, customer balance decreases. With discount allowed, customer balance decreases. With bad debt, if your customer turns in a bad debt, so kya hoga? So the entry is going to be bad debt debit and account receivable credit. Expense increase, asset decrease. Okay. And finally, वो दिन आ जाएगा जिसका हम सबको इंतजार था, which is receipts from customer. Your customer will pay you back your money. So the entry for this will be bank debit or cash debit and account receivable credit. Asset increase and asset decrease. So now, having said that, these are the entries that relates to your customer. अब आप मुझे एक बात बताएं, अगर मैं इन सब transactions को starting from here, if I try and record them in a ledger account, तो कैसे होगा? अभी देखते हैं जी कैसे होगा ये. So let's mark them with numbers. So let's give this entry as number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, 5, and number 6. तो based on this, हमें सबसे पहले अकाउंट खोलना पड़ेगा कैश और बैंक. फिर हमें अकाउंट खोलना पड़ेगा एक सेल्स का, एक और हमें अकाउंट खोलना पड़ेगा ट्रेड रिसीवेबल अकाउंट रिसीवेबल का, एक अकाउंट खुलेगा सेल्स रिटर्न का, एक अकाउंट खोलेगा डिस्काउंट अलाउड, and finally एक अकाउंट खोलेगा which is our bad debt, right? So if we'll start posting these entries, what was the first entry? Cash debit, sales credit. So cash का account debit because of sales, and sales का account credit because of cash. Now, when it says cash debit, that means you will be posting it on the debit side of cash account. And when it says sales credit, you will be posting it on the credit side of sales account. अब यहाँ पे एक बहुत generic confusion होता है. That generic confusion is, why am I debiting sales? I am not debiting sales over here. If you could see, I am not debiting sales over here. Instead, I'm debiting the cash account. Why? Because cash is to be debited. I am not crediting cash over here. I'm crediting the sales account because sales has to be credited. This is how you post the journal entries into particular ledgers. Okay? If it says cash debit, that means it has to be posted on the debit side of cash account. If it says sales credit, it has to be posted on the credit side of sales account. ठीक है जी? यहाँ तक clear है? Any confusion, any question? Anyone, any confusion, any question? Yes, no? No? Okay. So let's post the second entry. For the second entry, it says trade receivable debit and sales credit. The trade receivable account debit because of sales, and sales account credit because of trade receivable. Again, इसको भी देखते हैं. It says trade receivable account debit, so we debited the trade receivable account because of sales. It says sales credit, so we credited the sales account because of trade receivable. ठीक है जी? You should not be confused by now. Okay, why am I debiting sales over here? No, I am not debiting sales. I am debiting trade receivables account over here. Sales is just the reason why it is being debited. So actually, trade receivable account is being debited because of sales, and sales account credited because of trade receivables. Okay, next, sales return debit, account receivable credit. So sales number 3, sales return debit because of account receivable, and account receivable credit because of sales return. ठीक है जी? That's the third entry. Number 4 is discount allowed debit, account receivable credit. So discount allowed debit because of account receivable, and account receivable credit because of discount allowed. All right. So discount allowed debit, account receivable credit. All right. उसके बाद bad debts. Bad debts debit, account receivable credit. Okay. So bad debts account debit because of account receivable, and account receivable credit because of bad debts. ठीक है जी? Okay. So basically, what's going to happen over here is you will post transactions on the sites mentioned within the journal entries rather than, like debiting or crediting the individual accounts. Like, for example, let me just clarify. It says discount allowed debit. That means discount allowed account has to be debited because of account receivable, right? It says account receivable credit. The account receivable has to be credited because of discount allowed. And finally, the last transaction is bank debit, account receivable credit. So bank debit because of account receivable, and account receivable credit because of bank. So this was 3, this was 4, this was 5, and this was 6. ठीक है जी. So this is how you will post all the transactions of the sales cycle within the relevant ledgers. Okay. So this is how you actually make and post transactions relating to goods sold on cash or goods sold on credit to trade receivables. All right. Okay. So let's move on then. Let's move on to the next thing. The next thing is your purchase cycle. Okay. Purchase cycle is basically purchase of goods on credit. Purchase of goods. It could be cash, it could be credit. So purchases is basically your expense. Why is it an expense? Because it comes in an income statement. Income statement only accounts for your income and expenses from the accounting heads. Because there are 5 accounting heads, assets, liabilities, and capital will come in statement of financial position. Income and expenses will come in income statement. So expenses, when increases, will be posted on the debit side. Expenses, when decreases, will be posted on the credit side. So expense increasing, debit, expense decreasing, credit. ठीक है जी? Okay. So for the purchase cycle, the first transaction could be goods bought for cash. Yeah, it could be like goods bought for cash. The second transaction could be goods bought on credit. So if you're buying goods for cash and if you're buying goods on credit, the only difference is the supplier account. Let's see. If you're buying goods for cash, so entry will be purchases debit, trade payable credit, expense increase, liability increase. Is it the correct entry? No, this is not the correct entry. So because you are paying cash, so this is going to be purchase debit and cash credit, asset decrease. But in the later entry, it's going to be purchases debit and trade payable credit. That is going to be expense increase and liability increase. All right. So this is what happens when you buy goods on credit. And this is what happens like if you buy it on cash, you're paying cash instantly, end of the story. Okay, you don't need to ask the name of the person who's buying, the information of the person whom you're buying it from. You don't need to ask any of that. But if you're buying on credit, that means now you need to inquire who are you buying it from, because later on you need to pay that person. Okay, in fact, you won't be disturbed in getting to know who are you buying it from. The supplier would himself contact you and will be like, ठीक है जी, आप मुझे अपनी details बताएं, because the supplier is the one who needs to collect money from you. Okay, next thing would be uh purchase return. Goods that have been previously bought on credit when they're being returned back to you. So this is basically trade payable debit, purchase return credit, liability decrease, expense decrease, trade payable debit, purchase return credit. ठीक है जी. इसके बाद the next entry will be discount received when you are receiving discount. Okay. So the entry for this would be trade payable debit, discount received credit. Now, why is liability constantly decreasing? Because when you are buying on credit, liability increases. Which liability? Trade payable. When you are returning goods, that means now you don't need to pay the entire amount. Take care. The amount that you owe to your supplier will decrease because of returns. When the supplier gives you discount, when the supplier allows you discount, so you receive discount, now you don't owe your supplier the exactly same amount. So the amount you owe to supplier also decreases. Okay. And finally, from this, payments to supplier. Okay, ji. Payments to supplier, again, trade payable, debit, bank credit. This is liability decrease, asset decrease. Why is it? Because again, you are paying your supplier, so your liability is decreasing, or in fact, if you are paying in full, your liability is completely eliminated. This particular liability is completely gone because now you are no more liable to pay that person. Okay, so let's just mark them as number 1, number 2, number 3, 4, and 5. And let's try and make ledger accounts. So the first ledger account will be for purchases. The second account will be for cash or bank. The third ledger account will be for trade payables. The fourth ledger account is purchase return and discount received. I think we have covered all the ledger accounts over here. So the first entry is purchases debit, cash credit. So purchases debit because of cash and cash credit because of purchases. The same thing applies over here as it was being applied earlier. Purchases debit means you're going to post it on the debit side of purchase account. Cash credit means you're going to post on the credit side of cash account. ठीक है जी. So moving ahead with the second one, it is purchase debit, trade payable credit. Again, purchase debit because of trade payable, and trade payable credit because of purchases. Now, this trade payable account might be familiar. You might be familiar with it. Why? Because generally by now, you guys have quite oftenly prepared PLCA or individual trade payables account. We did that in the previous sessions. Okay. So as the entry says, it is like purchases debit because of trade payables, trade payable credit, the trade payable account credit because of purchases. Okay. Third is trade payable debit, purchase return credit. So trade payable account debit because of purchase return and purchase return credit because of trade payable. Fourth is trade payable debit, discount received credit. Trade payable debit because of discount received and discount received credit because of trade payable. And finally, it is trade payable debit and bank credit. So trade payable debit because of bank and bank credit because of trade payable. All right. So now let me tell you a simple way to remember all the entries. You just need to remember one entry and the others would follow. Okay. So let's look at its hack. देखो, सेल्स का ऑपोजिट is gonna be purchases. Yeah, sales का opposite is gonna be purchases, and sales का opposite is gonna be sales return, and purchase का opposite is gonna be purchase return. तो आप एक एंट्री याद कर लें, सेल की एंट्री याद कर लें, अकाउंट रिसीवेबल डेबिट एंड सेल्स क्रेडिट। तो इसकी ऑपोजिट एंट्री क्या होगी सेल्स रिटर्न की? The entry would be sales return debit and account receivable credit. अब सेल्स की ऑपोजिट होती है परचेज, तो परचेज की एंट्री क्या होगी? Instead of sales coming on the credit side, it's going to be purchase debit and account payable credit. और परचेज रिटर्न की एंट्री जो कि इसका ऑपोजिट है, it's going to be account payable debit and purchase return credit. अब सेल्स रिटर्न की जो एंट्री है, डिस्काउंट अलाउड की भी सेम एंट्री होगी, बैड डेट की भी सेम एंट्री होगी, एंड रिसीट्स फ्रॉम कस्टमर की भी सेम एंट्री होगी. Why is it? Because all of them are resulting in your receivable balance to decrease. Because of all of this, what is happening? Your account receivable is reducing. ठीक है जी. Similarly, जब आपने परचेज रिटर्न है, तो इसी तरह की सेम एंट्री डिस्काउंट रिसीव्ड की होगी, एंड इसी तरह की सेम एंट्री पेमेंट टू सप्लायर की होगी. ठीक है. So this is how it will go. You just have to remember one entry, and from that you can see, okay, if you know the entry for sales, so purchases is the opposite. If you know sales, sales done is the opposite. Sales return, discount allowed, bad debt receipts are the similar entries. Purchase return, discount received, and payments to supplier is again similar entries. तो आप एक एंट्री याद रखें, बाकी एंट्रीज आपको इजीली याद हो जाएंगे. That is not a problem. Okay? Okay. Moving ahead is miscellaneous entries. Okay, Hadi. Okay. Now, other miscellaneous entries would be, we'll note them down. Number 1, payment of expenses. If you're making a payment for any expense, so the entry is going to be that expense debit and bank credit. Why is it? Because your expense is increasing and asset is decreasing. ठीक है. अब this could be your rent, wages, heating and lighting. It could be any of these expenses. ठीक है. Okay. Your number 2 is other income. For example, commission or rent received. Because it's an income, so entry is going to be bank debit, commission or rent received credit. Why? Asset is increasing, income is increasing. ठीक है जी. उसके बाद next is purchase of non-current asset. If you are buying a non-current asset, so what will be the entry? That particular non-current asset, it could be land and building, fixtures, motor vehicle, whatever it is, debit, bank, or payable. credit. Why am I using bank or payable? If you are paying by cash, so this is asset increase. If you're paying by through check, the asset is decreasing. If you're buying it on credit, so liability is increasing. All right. Okay. Moving on. Number 4 is drawings by owner. If the owner is drawing cash, that's a different entry. If the owner is withdrawing stock, that's a different entry. So if the owner is withdrawing cash, so entry will be drawings debit and cash credit. Capital decrease, asset decrease. But if if it is stock drawings, so this will be drawings debit, purchases credit. Capital decrease, expense decrease. ठीक है जी. Why expense decrease? Because things that you have bought for the business is now being like used by the owner. So that is going to decrease. Overall purchase expense for the business will decrease. Okay. Number 5, loan borrowed. If you're acquiring a loan from bank, so entry is going to be bank debit, loan credit, asset increase, liability increase. Number 6, what is the possible entry for provision for depreciation of non-current asset? Whenever you're depreciating your non-current asset, what is going to happen? Income statement debit, provision for depreciation credit. Your expense is increasing and your asset is decreasing. Right? What is the entry for provision for doubtful debt? उसमें दो conditions होती हैं. Condition number 1 is if it is increasing or when it is decreasing. When the provision for doubtful debt is increasing, the entry is income statement debit, provision for doubtful debt, PFDD credit. But when it is decreasing, it's the opposite. PFDD, provision for doubtful debt, debit, income statement credit. तो यहाँ पे आपने कुछ इनकम स्टेटमेंट का रोल नजर आ रहा होगा. तो इनकम स्टेटमेंट का रोल बड़ा क्लियर है. इनकम स्टेटमेंट जब डेबिट होती है तो इसका मतलब है यू आर रिकॉर्डिंग एन एक्सपेंस. जब क्रेडिट होती है यू आर रिकॉर्डिंग एन इनकम. ठीक है जी. इसके बाद नंबर 8 could be owner investing capital. When the owner is investing capital, so entry could be like bank or any other asset, debit and capital credit, right? Because the owner will bring in either money through bank or through an asset in the business. So these all are miscellaneous entries that are used apart from sales cycle and purchase cycle. There could be any other entry as well, okay, but we'll see it along the the course of this entire thing. ठीक है जी. Any questions, anyone? No, no questions. So ठीक है जी. Let's just move ahead then. So these were the basic journal entries that you need to know. We did that through sales cycle, purchase cycle, and by doing that, we came across, the basic accounting principle. उसके बाद some miscellaneous entries. ठीक है जी, these were the miscellaneous entries. Okay, and finally some important notes. These things are very important. You should remember these things. So important notes. Okay. So the important notes are, number one, only income and expenses come within income statement. ठीक है? Only income and expenses come within income statement. ठीक है? Accruals concept is applied and they are not transferred to next accounting year unless there is prepaid or accrual. This means कि आपका जो इनकम स्टेटमेंट है, इनकम स्टेटमेंट के अंदर क्या होगा कि only income will be recorded and income will be kind of like income आपकी रिकॉर्ड होगी, उसी साल की इनकम उसी साल के एक्सपेंस उसी साल में रिकॉर्ड होगा और खत्म हो जाएगा. It cannot be transferred from this accounting year to next accounting year. ठीक है जी? But I'll share the PDF with you. Don't worry. Okay. So that's important tip number one. Number two, assets is equal to liabilities plus capital appear within SOFP. Assets, liabilities, and capital only appear in SOFP. Okay. Only these three heads are transferred to next accounting year. From one accounting year to another accounting year, you only transfer assets, liabilities, and capital. अब इनकम में अक्रूड लायबिलिटी बन जाती है, इसलिए वो ट्रांसफर हो जाता है. इनकम में अक्रूड एसेट बन जाता है, इसलिए वो ट्रांसफर हो जाता है. एक्सपेंस में अक्रूड लायबिलिटी बन जाती है, इसलिए वो ट्रांसफर हो जाता है. ठीक है. सिमिलरली आप अगर देखें, अगर आपके पास बैंक लोन का इंटरेस्ट इज नॉट पेड, दैट मीन्स दैट्स एन एक्सपेंस अक्रूड, दैट्स अ लायबिलिटी. वो लायबिलिटी नेक्स्ट ईयर ट्रांसफर हो जाती है. So whatever comes within SOFP is the one that gets transferred from this accounting year to next accounting year. Income statement की कोई भी चीज इस accounting year से next accounting year में नहीं जाती. ये आपको rule याद होना चाहिए. ठीक है? Okay. Secondly, profits आपका capital increase करते हैं. Losses आपको capital decrease करते हैं. Drawings आपको capital decrease करती है. ठीक है जी? Okay. इसके बाद number 3, the thing that you need to remember is working capital and capital employed and net assets. So you need to remember the basic formulas of working capital. Working capital is current assets minus current liabilities. Capital employed is like you can calculate it using two ways: non-current assets plus current assets minus current liabilities, or owner capital plus loan. That's your capital employed. Net assets means net assets ka other name is capital. That means your total assets minus total liabilities. So these are the basic three things that you can extract from your SOFP. Working capital. What is working capital? It is used to pay day-to-day routine expenses. What is your capital employed? Total investment by means of owner and loans in a business, and net assets is the owner's equity in the business, whatever is being owned in the business by the owners. ठीक है जी, ये तीन चीजें आपको याद रखनी पड़ेंगी. ये बेसिक चीजें हैं. Okay, what else? This was 3, that was 2, number 4. Another important factor that you should remember regarding income statement and SOFP is कि जी there are multiple concepts that applies. ठीक है. अब एक मिसाल है. There is this concept known as going concern. Going concern means the business will continue. The business will continue to operate in near future. That means more than 1 year. Neither you have an intention nor your financial position is that bad that the business will vanish. Okay? So your financial position is good enough to continue for more than 1 year, number one. Number two, you have an intention to continue your business for more than 1 year. Okay. So because of going concern concept, आप distinction करते हैं. You categorize assets as non-current assets and current assets. Why? Because you intend to continue for more than a year. तो आप कहते हैं, okay, these are the assets which can be used after 1 year, and these are the assets which will be used within 1 year. Clear distinction आ गई ना दोनों में? क्या distinction आ गई? आप ये बता रहे हैं कि because you have an intention to continue for more than a year, so these are the assets that could be used for more than a year. These are the assets that will be used for the next 1 year. Or you can say non-current assets are like fixed stationary assets that are non-movable. Current assets, non-movable in the sense, it won't be rotated. Current assets are the one which keeps on rotating. Like, for example, you keep on buying inventory will finish, you'll buy more, it keeps on coming and going. The bank balance will keep on changing, increasing, decreasing. Your trade receivable balance will keep on increasing and decreasing. ठीक है जी. Trade receivables balance will keep on increasing and decreasing. So these current assets are the ones which are in rotation, whereas non-current assets doesn't really rotate that often or on a daily basis. ठीक है जी. So ये छोटी-छोटी चीजें हैं जो कि आपको पता होनी चाहिए. Okay. So these are some few important tips regarding this. And now we need to finally look at the functions of daybooks. Okay. This is something which is actually you need to remember, because as far as the theory is concerned, it is very important. All right. So as far as daybooks are concerned, daybooks or journals are books of prime entries. ठीक है जी. In this, you have like 6 to 7 daybooks. Number one is Sales journal. You can also write sales daybook. Next is sales return journal. Purchase journal. Number 4 is purchase return journal. ठीक है जी. Now, the reason I have written them all together is all of these four are actually only used for credit transactions of inventory only, which means sales journal में क्या होगा? Credit sale of inventory. If you're selling non-current asset on credit, you won't record here. Purchase return, credit sale return is a credit sale return of inventory. Purchase journal, credit purchase of inventory. Purchase return is credit purchase return of inventory. नॉन करंट एसेट्स बाय कर रहे हैं वो यहाँ नहीं आएंगे. नॉन करंट एसेट सेल कर रहे हैं वो यहाँ नहीं आएंगे. ठीक है. इफ यू आर पेइंग फॉर एक्सपेंसेस थिंग्स लाइक दैट वो भी यहाँ नहीं आएगा. सो ये 4 अकाउंट्स पर्टिकुलरली सिर्फ इन्वेंट्री के लिए यूज होते हैं. ठीक है. उसके बाद यू हैव कैश बुक. कैश बुक में you record discount allowed, you record discount received, कैश और बैंक्स की, और जितनी भी अमाउंट रिसीट्स हो रही हैं, receipts and payments by cash or through bank, that gets recorded in cash book. And finally, you have the journal, also known as general journal. इसमें क्या क्या आता है? इसमें आता है number 1, credit sale and purchase of non-current asset. Number 2, non-cash expenses like depreciation and bad debt. Number 3, correction of errors. Number 4, opening entries of business, like if you're transferring from this year to next. If you're moving from this year to next year, you will start off with the journal. You will post all the assets and liabilities over there, and उन सब के accounts पे खुल जाएंगे. And number 5, stock drawings by owner. If the owner is taking goods for personal use, that also gets recorded in the journal. ठीक है जी. So 5 चीजें आपकी the journal में आ गई. Okay. So that's all for the day books. This is how things are recorded in day books. और इसके बाद the last thing for today we are looking at is ledgers. Ledgers are also known as books of original entries. This is where you make ledger accounts, where you post debit and credit. Okay. So first is sales ledger. क्या होता है sales ledger में? Individual ledger accounts of trade receivable only. That means credit customers. Every person to whom you will sell on credit, उसका account कहाँ होगा? Sales ledger में. That's it. और कोई account नहीं होगा. All your credit customers will have an account in sales ledger. ठीक है जी. Purchase ledger. यहाँ क्या होगा? Individual ledger account of trade payables only. That means credit suppliers. ठीक है जी. All right. तो customers account, sales ledger, supplier account, purchase ledger. अब आप सोचें, you must have prepared a trial balance sometime in life. ट्रायल बैलेंस में कितनी चीजें होती है? नॉन करंट एसेट्स, एक्सपेंसेस, लायबिलिटी, कैपिटल, इनकम, कितनी चीजें होती हैं? उन सारी लिस्ट में से सिर्फ ट्रेड रिसीवेबल सेल्स लेजर से आता है और ट्रेड पेबल परचेज लेजर से आता है. बाकी सारे के सारे टी अकाउंट्स कहाँ बने होंगे? इन जनरल लेजर, also known as nominal ledger. ठीक है. It holds accounts of all assets, liabilities, capital, income, and expenses. Everything will have everything that is there in the business, apart from receivables and payables. उन सब के T accounts कहाँ होंगे? General ledger में. And finally, some businesses, not all businesses, they use cash book as both a day book and a ledger. That means cash book में कौन सी transactions होंगी? Discount allowed, discount received, cash and bank. All right. So these are the ledgers. Ledgers are basically registers where you make T accounts. It's just like, formal register where you can find individual accounts. Like for example, if I want to find an account for Mr. Siddiqui, who's a customer, so I will look into the sales ledger for his account. If I need to find any supplier's account, purchase ledger is the destination. If I need to find like expense account, general ledger, asset account, general ledger. ठीक है जी. So that is with ledgers. I hope this information is suitable enough for you to have a basic recap of the entire accounting. Okay.